Imagine the scene. You go to sleep believing that your team has finally found the shortcut to that long-dreamed-of title, and you wake up with the feeling that everything collapsed in record time. That is exactly what a lot of people in Dallas feel today. Not long ago, the franchise decided to turn everything upside down. It gave up a generational point guard, one of those who control the rhythm of every single possession, to bet all its chips on a gigantic, established center, but with a medical history that always left half the world suspicious. It was that typical move of a franchise desperate for a shortcut. Either it works now, or we go down together. The message was clear. Enough of slow rebuilding, enough of long-term planning. Dallas wanted to shorten the path, skip steps, and force its way into the group of title favorites. On paper, it sounded bold and even seductive. Who would refuse the idea of having a monster in the paint, someone capable of controlling the boards, protecting the rim, scoring inside, and still imposing physical respect in any playoff series? Except the NBA is not a video game, and reality hit hard. Instead of that terrifying, ever-present defender, what the fans saw was a familiar script: injuries, games missed because of the medical staff, inconsistent performances, nights when the big man looked a long way from his peak, and an on-court chemistry that simply never clicked. The big swing turned into a weight tied to the franchise's ankle. While the roster tried to find itself, the schedule did not forgive, defeats piling up, confidence plummeting, and the dream of fighting at the top of the West turning into a battle just to avoid sinking for good. Inside the organization, the mood soured. What started with optimistic speeches and exciting projections turned into tense meetings, closed faces, public and private pressure. The fan base, which had embraced the project at the beginning, soon started to question everything. The media did not let it slide. Commentators began to label the move as one of the riskiest and worst calculated bets of recent years. And when the environment reaches that point, everyone knows one thing is inevitable. Someone has to pay the bill. It did not take long for the consequences to go beyond the four-line. The executive who led the decision to bet everything on the big man was let go. It was not a symbolic gesture, but a harsh message. This was not a small misjudgment. It was a high-risk gamble that blew up in everyone's face. Going into the current season, Dallas was already carrying that ghost. The bad start, with more stumbles than wins, only exposed what many people were already whispering behind the scenes. Insisting on this plan looked more like stubbornness than vision. And it is in this scenario that one name returns to the eye of the storm: Anthony Davis. Except this time, not as the savior, but as the piece that could be sacrificed to start again from zero. The center who arrived as the definitive solution became the symbol of the problem. Nobody questions the talent. When he is healthy, he is one of the most dominant players in the league. The problem is exactly that when. A franchise that already lives walking a tightrope cannot depend on someone who so often watches games in a suit on the side of the bench, unable to influence anything on the court. The patience that was once huge has run out. It is at this point that conversations emerge which, in another context, would sound unthinkable. And then, behind the scenes, a proposal explodes that changes everything. Dallas and Golden State sit at the table. On one side, the chance for the Texans to get rid of a heavy contract and all the physical instability that comes with Davis. On the other, the possibility for the California franchise to add another megastar to a core that is still trying to squeeze every last drop out of its title window, built around a legendary point guard and a fierce wing who lives and breathes competitiveness. This is not a simple trade. It is the kind of deal that has the potential to shift the balance of power across the entire conference. The structure of the package draws attention. In this scenario, Dallas would receive a young, athletic, explosive wing, seen for years as a diamond still being cut. A player who, in an environment with more minutes, more responsibility, and less shadow from historic veterans, could finally emerge as a protagonist. Along with him would come a veteran who, for more than a decade, was the face of defense in Golden State. An emotional, controversial leader, but with a tactical intelligence that few in the league possess. To round off the package, a three-point specialist, one of those who punish any defensive lapse and stretch coverage to the limit, and also a future first-round draft pick. For a franchise that is beginning to talk about rebuilding, that kind of asset becomes pure gold. On the other side, Golden State would receive Anthony Davis and a young point guard starving for space, a player willing to fight for every minute on the court to prove he deserves a permanent place in the rotation. In practice, it is a marriage of media exposure, ambition, and calculated desperation. For Dallas, this negotiation goes far beyond getting rid of a player who did not fit as expected. It would be the official signature of a change of era. The shortcut era ends, and the Cooper Flag era begins. The rookie is seen not as just another name, but as the center of gravity of the franchise's future. A versatile forward who guards multiple positions, reads the game like someone far more experienced, and has an almost obsessive competitiveness. He is not just a scorer. He is the kind of player who influences the game in practically every aspect. Now imagine this kid taking the floor alongside a Jonathan Kuminga, finally set free, without having to look to the side and see veterans occupying his space and saving the season year after year. You suddenly have a duo of wings who are extremely athletic, aggressive, full of energy, and with a frightening ceiling for development. Add to that an elite shooter to space the floor, pulling help away from the paint, and a seasoned veteran commanding the defense and the locker room, and all of a sudden Dallas's identity starts to change completely. Out goes win now at any cost. In comes build something great calmly, but with a clear plan. But this shift also exposes another uncomfortable reality. The timeline of some of the stars on the roster no longer matches the new project. Kyrie Irving, for example, is a genius with the ball in his hands, but he is at a stage of his career where the focus is to fight for a title immediately, not to lead years of transition. Does it make sense to surround a rookie like Flag with expensive veterans used to competing at the very top of the league, who do not want to hear about patience and rebuilding? The more people talk about retooling, the more some big names naturally start to appear in exit rumors. While Dallas flirts with the idea of a total restart, the conversation on the other side is almost the opposite. In Golden State, the discussion is loaded with emotion. We are talking about a team that defined an era, built a recent dynasty, and taught its fans to believe that as long as the core is together, there will always be a chance to get back to the top. Tinkering with that core is not simple, nor cold. Taking away from the roster, the player who, for years, was the brain of the defense and the emotional spark of the team is like ripping out a piece of its very identity. Part of the fan base sees this as inevitable. They see the physical wear, feel that the peak is in the past, and understand that if the franchise wants to have a real shot at something big again, it will need to make tough decisions. Another part, however, cannot even accept imagining the team without that leader who has always worn just one jersey in the league. It is the kind of attachment that does not show up on a spreadsheet, but it weighs heavily. Despite that, the front office knows it cannot live on memories forever. If it wants to give this offensive core one last big chance, it needs a leap in talent in the paint. Now pause for a moment and imagine a trio of Curry, Jimmy Butler, and Anthony Davis on the court at the same time. On one side, one of the greatest shooters in history, capable of forcing the defense to pick him up 8 meters from the basket. On the other, a wing who lives for physical contact, who likes confrontation, who decides big games by sheer will, attacking half-court, hunting mismatches, going right at the opponent's main stars, closing it. A center who, when in good shape, protects the rim, alters shot trajectories, dominates the boards, and still delivers offensive volume near the basket. In theory, it is a tactical nightmare for any opponent. But as always, theory is prettier than practice. To build that scenario, Golden State would have to give up depth, defense, and a considerable slice of its own future. Kuminga, for example, is still a project, but a highly valuable one. His body, his explosiveness, and the fact he is still young make him a coveted asset. The veteran who symbolizes the defense may no longer be at his physical peak, but he remains the voice that organizes everything at the back. that anticipates plays, that calls out rotations, that demands the right attitude. Taking that piece off the board means having to completely reinvent the entire defensive system. And above all, there is the fear that no one can ignore. What if Davis keeps struggling with the same injuries? What if, precisely in the decisive moments when this super lineup needs him most, the big man is on the injury list? It is a real risk, which no one inside the organization can afford to downplay. And that is why the California franchise's front office is not looking only at this move. In parallel, another name is gaining strength behind the scenes: Domantas Sabonis. The Sacramento big man is almost a complementary opposite to Davis. Instead of being known for spectacular blocks and dominance as a rim protector, Sabonis has built his reputation as an offensive engine from the paint. He scores consistently, clears the glass with a series of rebounds, and, above all, dishes out assists as if he were a point guard trapped in a big man's body. His feel for the game is perfect for systems that live off constant ball and player movement, exactly the kind of offense Golden State has designed over the last decade. Rumors suggest that, after a start in Sacramento below expectations, some people around the league have begun to speculate whether the time is coming for the Kings to test the market and find out what Sabonis is really worth in terms of picks and young players. That is where Golden State comes in as a possible destination. With all the financial constraints that surround teams spending at the limit, any deal of that size would hardly involve only two franchises. Far more likely would be a multi-team scenario, with an organization from the East known for doing salary cap gymnastics, helping to absorb contracts, redistribute pieces, and clear the path for Sabonis to head to California. At this point, one thing is clear. It is no exaggeration to say that the Warriors have put their name in practically every conversation that involves a major center capable of changing the team's level. Whether it is a physical defender like Davis or a maestro of the paint like Sabonis, the franchise knows it needs to shake something big up if it wants to avoid the most dangerous route of all, getting stuck in mediocrity. I am going to dive even deeper into this scenario, calmly explain the real impact of Sabonis, the crossroads facing the Kings, and, above all, how all of this opens a gigantic door for a name that has been gaining strength in backstage conversations: Sotto. When you look closely at Sabonis's game, it becomes clear why so many people around the league see him as an almost natural fit with Golden State's offensive system. In Sacramento, he became the center of everything. He gets the ball at the top of the key, with his back to the basket or facing it, and from there he orchestrates the attack. Screens, diagonal cuts towards the rim, handoffs followed by picks, quick passes to shooters positioned in the most efficient spots on the floor. He is the kind of player who makes his teammates look better simply by making their decisions easier. And in a team that has built its identity on constant movement and collective reading of the game, the idea of having a center with that profile is almost irresistible. The numbers in Sacramento back up that impression. High-volume rebounding, consistent scoring, and, above all, assists at rare levels for someone in his position. He is not the most intimidating rim protector in the league, far from it, but he makes up for part of those limitations with his positioning and the physicality to battle for every possession in the paint. The problem is that, in playoff series, every player's weaknesses are exposed to the limit, and Sabonis's defensive deficiencies, especially in rim protection in two-man game situations and in more aggressive switches, have already been exploited. Any franchise interested in him knows this, and the question becomes, is it worth sacrificing major assets for a big man who gives you an almost perfect offense, but forces you to reinvent your entire defensive structure? On the Kings' side, the doubt is similar, but seen in the mirror. Letting go of a center who carries the team offensively is always painful. However, if the front office looks at the cold reality of the standings and concludes that, even with Sabonis playing at a high level, the current ceiling is limited, it may reach the conclusion that this is the ideal moment to test the market and sell high. A package with first-round picks, young versatile wings, and maybe even the chance to reconfigure the whole roster construction becomes tempting. In such a scenario, Sacramento would not just be trading a player. It would be agreeing to start a new cycle, This is where the board gets even more complex. Because while the conversations revolve around big names, massive contracts, and trades that shake up the top of the league, there is another quieter but equally important layer: the search for smart bets, low cost, and high upside. It is in that space that the name which has been gaining traction among insiders, fans, and analysts begins to fit: Sotto. While Dallas and Golden State discuss moves capable of blowing up headlines, Kai keeps stacking reasons to be taken seriously with every game in the B-League. In a recent match against Kyoto, he delivered exactly the kind of performance that catches any scout's eye: 20 points, 4 rebounds, 3 assists, and, more important than the stat line, a constant, mature presence in every decisive moment of the game. From the opening minutes, it was clear he was not there just to occupy space in the paint. Combining length, mobility, and a refined touch, he attacked the opposing defense in different ways. When the defense sagged too much, he punished it with mid-range jumpers, the result of hours of quiet work in practice. When he received the ball near the rim, he used his body to protect it and finished smartly, without forcing low-percentage plays. Under pressure, he showed something even more valuable: court vision. Instead of forcing wild drives, he read the double teams, found open teammates, and handed out assists that highlight an increasingly clear understanding of pace, spacing, and timing. In the third quarter, he condensed all of that into a signature play. He received the ball, attacked 2 defenders, drew the foul, made the basket, and still knocked down the additional free throw. It was not just a 3-point play. It was a statement of leadership. These performances are not showing up in isolation. They are part of an arc of evolution that the numbers help tell. Kai is very close to hitting important marks in the B-League. He is only a few points away from reaching 1,000 in the competition, something that automatically places him in a group of players recognized for offensive consistency. He has already crossed the 500-rebound barrier, establishing himself as a real presence in the paint, securing extra possessions for his team, and ending opponents' attacks with authority. And he is just a few assists away from reaching the 3-digit mark in that category, an achievement that, for a center, says a lot about his ability to think the game. It is not just volume, it is real impact on wins and losses. With every game, it becomes harder to treat him as just an exotic prospect. He has become a player who demands specific game planning from the opposition. And, in parallel, the buzz about his future has started to grow. Among all the speculated destinations, one appears more often: the Golden State Warriors. Part of that comes from the fans themselves, who have started to stir up a sort of informal campaign on social media, imagining Kai's fit on a roster that has, for years, lacked a center with length, physical presence, and room to grow. From the Warriors' perspective, the idea makes sense on several levels. In a scenario where the franchise needs to decide whether it will sacrifice the future in an all-in bet for Anthony Davis or Sabonis, the possibility of adding a young big man like Kai represents an alternative path. Instead of sending multiple picks and key players for a star who is already established but expensive and with an injury history, the franchise could opt for a relatively low-cost move, embracing the development of a center who has already shown he can be productive and who still has a lot of room to improve. It is easy to imagine the fit. On offense, Kai could initially function as a finisher of simple actions, setting screens for the point guard, rolling to the rim, and taking advantage of the spaces created by the perimeter. Over time, as he gained confidence in the system, he could be tested as a facilitator in actions at the high post, using his court vision to find shooters in their favorite spots. Defensively, his height and wingspan would help fix part of the rim protection issues the team has shown. Even if he is not yet a perfect defender, the simple fact of taking up space, contesting shots, and battling for rebounds would already be an improvement on what the roster currently offers at the position. Beyond the technical impact, there is a broader strategic component. Kai carries something that no spreadsheet can fully measure: the weight of being a symbol for Asian basketball. Bringing in a player with that profile to a global franchise like the Warriors would also be a branding move, bringing the organization even closer to a fan base that is growing in number and passion for the NBA. But, unlike other purely commercial bets from the past, here there is real basketball to sustain the interest. Kai would not just be a face in campaigns. He has enough talent to fight for minutes and, with proper development, become a constant presence in the rotation. When you place all of this in the wider context, the picture gains an extra layer of complexity. On one side, Dallas is considering closing the Anthony Davis era and fully embracing, with all the consequences, the Cooper Flag project, surrounded by athletic wings and a cerebral veteran to guide the locker room. On the other, Golden State is torn between sacrificing the future for a proven center or betting on hybrid paths, mixing big names like Davis or Sabonis with medium-term gambles like Sotto. Sacramento, in the meantime, weighs up whether it should keep insisting on the current formula or use Sabonis's value to restart the project before it is too late. In the end, all those decisions intertwine. A trade involving Davis could redefine the West. A move for Sabonis could shift Sacramento from an intermediate tier to a full rebuild. Kai's arrival in the NBA, especially at a franchise like the Warriors, could open a new phase of connection between the league and an entire market of fans. Nothing exists in isolation. Every front office choice echoes on the court, in the stands, and even in the imagination of supporters who dream of seeing their teams back at the top. And if you have made it this far, it is because you really live and breathe basketball and do not want to miss anything that might happen on this crazy NBA chessboard. So take advantage now, before you leave the video, and drop a like, because that shows you want to see more content at this level, with analysis, behind-the-scenes context, and all these scenarios that no one really explains properly out there. And of course, if you are not subscribed yet, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you do not miss the next stories, the next backstage bombshells, the possible destinations of stars like Anthony Davis and Sabonis, the moves from Dallas and Golden State, and of course, every new chapter in Sotto's journey and the Cooper Flag era. Stay with us, because when these trades really explode, you will already know exactly where it all started.